For today's video, I speak at length on different topics of discussion that highlight my experience with SMT Nocturne. If there is a particular section you want to hear about, check the description for timestamps. So with that out of the way, let's talk about story and characters. Simple yet profound. Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne is a creation myth fused with the character design prowess of Kazuma Kaneko. There can be no doubt that Nocturne's feel and ambience haunts players long after completing it, as it delivers a story that is distilled down to a tale that plays as if it is being deciphered off of an ancient tablet long forgotten. Nocturne begins with the end of the world, and the theming of death and rebirth will be interlaced throughout the story's narrative. One thing that I continually find with the criticisms of Nocturne is that its narrative is too bare bones. I genuinely find this to be intentional and not an oversight from the story directors. If you are new to the SMT series, then you will immediately find that it is a conglomeration and congealing of many of the deities from the world's religions, fairy tales, and belief systems. The majority of characters and NPCs that you'll be discoursing with throughout the story will be characters and deities from myth and religion. Pixie can be in the party alongside Beelzebub or perhaps even Sarasvati. So naturally, the overall plot of Nocturne carries the feel of reading a creation myth. Oftentimes, we are told names and what occurred over a great expanse of time in the span of 2 sentences. We hear about great characters of myth and legend, but often who they were as a person is lost to history. Nocturne begins with 3 friends, the protagonist, Izumu, and Chiaki. They're heading to a hospital to visit their ill teacher. On the way to the hospital, the main character encounters Hijiri at Yoyogi Park as the police are clearing the crime scene from what was apparently a ritualistic murder scene. The seeds are planted for occultic activity, but we soon find ourselves meeting up with our friends at the hospital. We are given some brief conversations with them at the hospital. We find the banter between the characters show their friendships and how they've been friends for apparently a long time, and they speak candidly with one another. However, rather quickly we find ourselves at the center of the conception, the end of our world and the beginning of the next. The main character is saved by a mysterious elderly woman and her child. The main character is forced to ingest a Magatama that is the source of demonic power and strength. And immediately we find that his humanity is severely limited by his newfound power. We wander alone through the hospital, trying to discover what has happened. The conversations we once knew are now replaced by empty, vain attempts to grow our ranks with our new demonic comrades. The threads of humanity slowly being severed over time. Nothing but the expanse of the vortex to replace them. Simple, yet profound. A lot of times, it is not in what we see or hear in a story that can so directly impact us, but rather what isn't stated, what isn't seen, but rather felt. One of the reasons the original Dark Souls has grown to be one of my favorite games of all time, and it's also a masterclass in world building, is because for a majority of the experience, we're alone. The only sound we hear is the clank of our armor as we wander hollow-infested streets. SMT Nocturne shows us a glimpse of humanity in the beginning, but then intentionally strips it from us, just as we see the humanity of the Demi-Fiend and his friends fade drastically to myth and lore. As we have brief encounters with our friends from the past, we begin to see them give in to loneliness and desperation, only to be replaced by the reasons of distant, unfeeling gods. Deities that care nothing for the person, but rather view them as short footnotes in the long expanse of history, reduced to nothing more than a sentence in the holy canon of Nocturne's scripture. Chiaki, once our friend, reduced to the raw sieve of unending thirst for power and strength. Izumu, isolated to a point where he is retracted from all but himself and his lonely God. I would elaborate further, but I think you get the idea. I will be the first to admit that this is highly irregular for what many mainstream gamers and reviewers would view as an enjoyable experience or narrative. However, it is intentionally and extremely effective. The intentional thankfulness I feel when I find a demon with a human personality was a sigh of relief and a much-needed oasis in the isolated world of the Vortex. The Vortex world is a clean, purified slate ready for creation, ready for a new beginning. I do want to mention some rather incredible symbolism that we find within Nocturne. I won't spend a great deal of time on this, but as someone who appreciates this, I just can't help but share. I think the most fascinating characters in the whole narrative comes from the elderly woman and the young child, or should I say the young woman and the old man, constantly flipping between beginning and the end, Alpha and Omega. Almost a beacon of doom luring us towards the destruction of the existing system of creation and rebirth. This is obviously a nod to the Judeo-Christian deity, but also it's an inversion of it, asking us to take the three reasons that in the game are actually in the shape of a 6, this being a definite symbolism of the number 666, which is the number or mark of the beast. What is fascinating is that in the Bible, this is merely the number of a man. So in Nocturne, we see these three individuals sacrificing their humanity to foreign gods to develop their reasons for creation. But with the true demon-ending route, we are employed by Lucifer to disregard all human reasoning and uproot the system. And be sure to note that Nocturne is not a place for happy endings. Nocturne definitely tips its hat to the rebellious nature of Lucifer seen in the canon of Scripture. I say this to say that Nocturne definitely has many acknowledgments to the world's religions and their deeper meanings. I've merely shared the connotations and symbolistic nods as seen through the eyes of a Westerner. There's infinitely more symbolism for Buddhism and other religions in the world. It's deep and fascinating topics for discussion. However, this is a rabbit hole of discussion, and it's time for me to move on to the next section. Cosmic Kaneko and the team have crafted a world and cast of characters that are a clinic for profound and simplistic character designs. They offer purposeful design decisions that carry meaning, from the Demi-Fiend's tattoos to the structure and presentation of Gozu Tenno. Nocturne is a glimpse into a creation myth that haunts you well after you have chosen your reason for creation. Nocturne is a representation of the era it was created, a titan of the genre that may never have been rewarded with the financial success it deserved, but rather changed and shaped the genre it contributed to. Nocturne has already attained legendary status among turn-based gamers, and for good reason. It's bold in its approach and unapologetically delivers its message. The implications of its narrative and empty expanse of the Vortex world still beckon me to dwell on their meaning. Music. Now, I think it is rather common knowledge that the Remaster has bad audio compression. Look, PS2 games can be painful to handle and port. We all know this. However, it is an area of extreme note that the audio quality is not good. However, as for the soundtrack for Nocturne itself, it is one for the history books. The normal battle theme is one that immediately instills adrenaline, and I never got tired of hearing it. And let me tell you, you're going to be hearing it a lot. Nocturne is notorious for having a high encounter rate for battle, but we'll get to that later. The ambient and synth songs help to set you at unease when navigating the tunnels of the Vortex or scaling the foreboding towers in the distance. The overworld theme is one of my all-time favorites. It instills a feeling akin to hope, the quiet resolution that things won't end well, but they are going to end regardless. It's a feeling and a sense of haunting adventure. I love it. Nocturne is not a happy game, but it does have moments of levity that have their own songs to help relate that break in the tension. My thoughts on the remaster: we all know the music quality is bad, but the voice acting is incredible. The DLC and difficulty options are there for those who are interested. Now, the HD remaster does have the ability to download the DLC to have Dante from the Devil May Cry series, but also the default is Raido from the Devil Summoner series. Now, Gato's voice actor is impeccable, and the animations for Raido's spells and summons are cooler in my book, but this is outside of Dante's Showtime attack, which is the coolest darn thing in the game. However, all in all, I can verify that I loved my second playthrough with the remaster being Raido. Highly recommend to check it out. And he is the canonical story route. The remaster has some rather odd things about it though. Every once in a while, the game would fade to black and then immediately fade back up to normal lighting. I'm not a technical person. I genuinely have no idea why this occurs, but it is something other people have reported as well. Also, I made it through the entire game without any crashes outside of one fight where the frame rate just stuttered pretty hard. However, and I kid you not, after beating Lucifer for the True Demon ending, the game crashed on me. Legit the only time it happened in my entire run. And let me tell you, Lucifer is a top tier troll, and that one stung a little. Luckily, there is a save point right before the final boss, but it did require me to beat both bosses again, so that really sucked. Outside of that, though, the remaster looks incredible, and that crash at the end was something that apparently did plague the original PS2 version of the game, but that is something I've only read on one forum thread, but it's still not a good enough excuse. But I am playing it on Switch, so I don't know if that happens any on the PlayStation version, but I still hate it when Trails of Cold Steel 3 did it to me, and it sure annoyed the kalpas out of me when it happened in Nocturne. The remaster is, without a doubt, the best and most definitive way to play the game. Despite the shortcuts and setbacks with the remaster, the voice acting is top-notch, the script revisions are really well done, and even in some cases, the clarification of demon names was changed, and I much appreciated that. Still, though, there are some cons to the remaster, but being able to choose spells to pass over in Demon Fusion is invaluable, and I can't imagine going back at this point. Without question, remaster is the way to go with the game. The experience is made considerably easier and more manageable by the ability to choose what spells you can pass through on Fusion. For those of you who may not know, in the original version of Nocturne, when you would do Demon Fusions, it would randomly choose spells to pass over, so you would have to soft reset constantly. Mega annoying. Excellent change with the remaster. Legit, I cannot overstate how incredible this quality of life change is. If you're upset by any changes of this, you are still able to let it just randomly choose. However, why would you do that? It's freaking incredible. Gameplay and progression of Nocturne takes the traditional gameplay loop of turn-based RPGs, then ramps it up with intense and difficult combat, but also gives you a set list of rules that enemies are going to follow as well as yourself. Now, despite the rather intimidating reputation that Nocturne has acquired over the years, I do want to state that it is not as bad as everyone lets on. It is, however, the most challenging turn-based game I've ever beaten. I have played more punishing video games that are turn-based, however, they just infuriated me to the point to where I wanted nothing to do with them. Despite Nocturne's segments that feel unfair, there are tools at your disposal that make every challenge more than surmountable if you are prepared. Now, the major gameplay loop you're going to be experiencing is in Demon Recruitment and Fusion. As you encounter enemies throughout the game, you are able to recruit them by talking to them and playing the game of bartering with them to win them over to your side. Demons differ in abilities and power level while also having their own races that bring certain progression routes and variety when fusing them together with other races of demons. I'll be honest, demon recruitment can be just straight up infuriating, but there are factors that are going to help you out. Because nothing's more frustrating when you've given away a lot of resources or health. Just have the demon to tell you to pound sand and give you the metaphorical middle finger. What Magatama you have equipped, and I'm going to be talking about that soon, and also what alignment you are very important to helping you recruit, but also what the moon phase is going to be. Now, I know I've just made this sound very complicated, but it's really not that bad. The moon phase, or the Kagetsuchi phase that you can see up in the top left corner of the screen, it's definitely going to matter and how easy recruitment can be. The phase of the moon changes depending on how far you've traveled or walked in the game. And when the moon phase is full, all monsters are going to become more hostile and harder to recruit, and they're going to be more likely to call in reinforcements after they've been defeated. However, it does enable you to speak to demons that would otherwise be unable to speak to, such as wilder race of demons. As you recruit demons, you're going to find that some of them possess the capability to evolve. Now, this is a system that is prevalent in Nocturne. It is in other entries, however, you're probably going to utilize it more in Nocturne, and I would like to see it come back in SMT5. Essentially what happens is, if you have a demon in your party and you fight with it a lot and level it up, it'll reach a point where it will ask if it can evolve. And you say yes, and it will turn into a more improved demon. Maybe it'll get rid of a weakness or attain a spell that'll help you in combat better. You can also have a reserve of demons or party members in the likely chance that one of your party members die in combat and you just want to summon another one in. Or better yet, you can have them heal your party after combat and save resources and items. Now, the Cathedral Shadows is a staple in the SMT series, and Mido is going to help you along your journey. At this location, you're able to fuse demons together to acquire new or powerful demons. This is mandatory for smooth progression throughout Nocturne. You're going to acquire demons, unlock their abilities through leveling them, then you can record them as they are now in the Demon Compendium at the Cathedral Shadows, then fuse them with others to create your Reason Killing Squad. It is the gameplay loop that defines the SMT series and the subsequent spin-offs. It is as integral as the press turn battle system itself. Don't worry though, if you need demons back for fusion, you can always resummon them for a fee through the Demon Compendium found at the Cathedral Shadows. Though it's not going to be immediately available to you at the beginning of Nocturne, but it is going to unlock rather early on. I do want to recommend 3 massively important demons that you can find, buy, or create along your journey. The first pixie you find in the game, never get rid of her. Trust me, you're going to thank me later. Also, in the first Kalpa, I believe it is, talk to the Shady Broker and make sure you buy Pisaka. He is able to give you a Stoma, which is going to help you lower the encounter rate of demons that you outlevel, and every other buff to help you deal with environmental hazards, such as lighting dark corridors or avoiding poison clouds on the floor. He's extremely useful, and you'll always want to keep him. And lastly, Daisojo. He's your bro, yo. Without question, the best demon in Nocturne. You can get him in the 30s, I believe. Anyway, it's after you're defeating him as a boss, and he will absolutely last you all the way through the end of the game. He's that good. The best healer and mana battery in the game, bar none. Now, I mentioned Magatamas before. These are bug-like demonic creatures that the Demi-Fiend can equip or ingest, and they offer immunities to certain spells and access certain abilities as you level up. This is imperative to understand for your progress throughout Nocturne. Let's say there's a boss that heavily uses Bufu or ice magic. Well, then equip a Magatama that makes you resistant to ice or Bufu magic, and you have negated the major threat from that encounter. This same Magatama will enable it to where when you level up, you can gain access to certain abilities that you can equip on the Demi-Fiend. Now, you can only have a certain number of abilities on the Demi-Fiend, so choose wisely what you're going to discard because you can never get that ability back in that playthrough. Now, as you level up, you can allocate 1 stat point to either strength, vitality, magic, agility, and luck. As for tips on what builds to follow throughout your playthrough, I always personally go for a strength build, as it makes the true demon ending easier. However, a magic-based protagonist is absolutely viable, so feel free to experiment. But I do encourage you to have a plan in mind as soon as possible, as you will not be able to reallocate stats once they are distributed. Combat. At last, it is time. Without question, the single greatest contribution Nocturne has given to not only SMT and Persona, but all of gaming as a whole. A cornerstone of combat development, and without question, my all-time favorite combat system in turn-based gaming. It is unmatched because it is easy to pick up the tools you are offered, but it also gives you a high skill ceiling for those who wish to take on the tough challenges of the game at lower levels. In essence, the press turn battle system functions off of giving you 4 turns, one for each of your active party members. If you are able to hit the enemy unit with a spell they are weak to, example being hitting Jack Frost with a fire spell or Agi spell, then you will initiate a press turn. This will add an additional move in your turn order. So if you play your cards right, you can effectively double your amount of turns. What is also extremely underrated about this system is that there can be times when your turn would be wasted because you can't really buff your party members, or let's say you can't debuff the enemy anymore. And if you moved, maybe they would block or reflect your spell. Fear not. The press turn battle system can allow you to take a half turn and pass your turn to a party member. Let me give you an example. Maybe you're in a mega fight with a boss. You've already focused on the Demi Fiend to empower your next physical attack. However, the boss has just removed all buffs from your party. I had built my team to have Terrakaja on all my demons, so I would pass Demi Fiend's turn, and then throw up 3 Terrakajas from my demons, then come back to the Demi Fiend and hit the boss with the buffed Freikrugel spell. This is just one example. The possibilities are endless, but the tools to combat are simple to approach. Also, Nocturne structures and balances its gameplay on the power of buffs and debuffs. Fights can be extremely simple or impossibly hard based on buffs and debuffs alone. Moves like Tsukukaja, which boost your evasion and hit rate, and debuffs such as Fog Breath that can debuff the enemy's hit and evade rate are invaluable. Always have these at your disposal. One of the most famous encounters in all of Nocturne, and gaming for that matter, is with Matador, and he's borderline impossible to beat without these buffs and debuffs. Alongside these movesets, we are able to progress from demons that might have 1 or 2 good spells, and then fuse them together to eventually create an extremely powerful demon unit in our roster. Nocturne may be famous for its difficulty, but I argue that it provides more challenge so that we are incentivized to dig deeper into the intricacies of demon abilities and strategies. The sky is the limit, and that is why Nocturne holds up still as one of the best playing RPGs, and it came out originally back in 2004. Solid game design transcends time, my friends. The challenge is great, but with the right Magatamas, demons, and plan of attack, you can conquer the Vortex world. A purified form of game design that is niche in that it is purposeful in all its aspects. Nocturne has components that have aged like a fine wine, whereas others have aged like a cask of whiskey, punching harder than you remembered. Combat and gameplay are the Rosetta Stone of turn-based gaming, introducing the iconic and nigh flawless mechanics of the press turn battle system. Easily one of the greatest things Nocturne has given to the SMT and Persona series. However, the themes and tropes in Nocturne offer societal and religious commentary that carry haunting implications, with insight that reach out from the confines of a niche JRPG. The mannequins as a representation of human emotion, once good people reduced to cold and unfeeling machines of reason, ambition corrupting humans to become nothing more than the pawns of greater powers, The duality of man as seen in the major players of the story offer a glimpse into concepts and religious implications that relate the bold message of how mankind always looks to others or greater powers for the reason for existence. Simple, yet profound. The reverberations of Nocturne's impact on the turn-based genre can still be felt today. Similar to how people look back at earlier MMOs such as classic World of Warcraft for a baseline foundation for all that comes after it, Nocturne is the platform from which greatness would continue to grow with the subsequent SMT universe and mainline entries in my beloved Persona games. I want to thank you all for watching my review and discussion on SMT Nocturne. My journey through the Persona and SMT universe put me on a collision course to play this game, and I'll never forget my experience with it. One of my favorite RPGs of all time. But how about you? Have you played SMT Nocturne? Let me know down in the comments. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe and hit that notification bell for more turn-based RPG content. And until then, I'll see you all next time.